6 years, that number's skyrocketed to over 25, almost 27 unicorns in the Denver Front Range. And our panels today are 5 leading founders that are leading billion-dollar-plus organizations in our community that 6 years ago, we had a handful. Today, we have 5 on stage back-to-back, and we couldn't be more excited. So with that, I'll get started with Jen Knight, who's the co-founder and CTO of AgentSync. And really excited for you to enjoy this series, and thank you all for being here today. So for those of you who don't know Jen Knight is one of those not only unicorn founders, but amazing female entrepreneurs and engineering leaders that drives the engineering passion into all the organizations that she's built. When you look back on her career, she had the ability to be the first Salesforce development lead inside of LinkedIn and built out that platform that really drives LinkedIn's success in their sales platform today. Previous to that, she built the sales function. Again, all the operational and technology and engineering components of sales for Dropbox. And from inception to IPO was the power plant that really made that company successful. And previous to that, she had the ability to really build things at Stripe, building their internal systems function. And again, the engineering core of what today, when you think about Stripe, is the universal transaction platform that almost every company on the internet uses. Proud graduate of Brown University, and today in Denver, Colorado, she calls it home. We're so excited to have Jen Knight here, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So first things first, entrepreneurial stories and entrepreneurial journeys always have lots of twists and turns. You have this spectacular background of working at LinkedIn, Dropbox, Stripe, 3 of the most prominent companies in the entire planet when we think about the enterprise software and enterprise businesses. How did that spark building AgentSync? And working in really large companies, what gave you that entrepreneurial energy to step out on your own?
It's a really good question. They're actually in reverse order. So we started at LinkedIn, Dropbox, and then Stripe. And the reason that's important is actually the size of those companies at that time. So we think of LinkedIn today, it's massive, right? I joined LinkedIn in 2011. In 2011, it was 1,000 people. When I left in 2014, it was almost 7,000 people. Niji, my co-founder and partner, was there in 2010, and in 2010, LinkedIn was 400 people. So it's monolithic today, right? We all think of LinkedIn, we all know it, we're on it, it's this huge entity. But at that time, it was going through a really specific period of growth. Dropbox was the same for me. I was there when it was about 500 people to just past 2,500, so that was 2014 to 2017. And then I was at Stripe from 2017 to 2020. It was about 500 or 600 people when I got there, and it was over 2,500 when I left. And so I got to see in those companies that period of growth and scale. And it was really exciting. And it was a really interesting way to look at how you grow. For me at LinkedIn, it was all sales systems. So it was just the Salesforce platform, but huge, huge depth. We were global. We had different lines of business. We were scaling out quickly, iterating on different business models. We had Recruiter, which we all are aware of. But at that time, that was the first product there. And then they were trying marketing solutions. What did that look like? Sales Navigator was the startup within LinkedIn. And it was the one that kind of got starved for resources and was trying to prove itself. So it was a great experience for me to see how those businesses grew, what they were trying out, how they iterated. They are big names, but every company goes through periods of growth and experimentation. And I'm always very thankful that I got to see a lot of what great could look like and what challenge looks like. Right? Mistakes are made. Every company has the great year, the bad year, the great quarter, the bad month, whatever that is. And you're not free from that. Even when you're big, you're not free from it. So it gave me and Niji a lot of experience in starting small, iterating through things, and then over time learning how to present in the big scary audit committee, do board prep, run numbers, all that. And that's the skills ultimately that come to running a company, right? So when he left Zenefits and said, I think this is an idea, we were like, why not? We have all these skills we built, like, why not try it? Worst case, it fails. We'll go back and work somewhere else and kind of go on the journey again.
Having the pleasure of getting to know you and Niji over the last couple of years, I think one of my favorite parts about the story is that the first time I heard about AgentSync, one of their early investors had mentioned that they're in their minivan, they're headed to Denver, Colorado, they're leaving San Francisco, help them out. And I would love to hear about the story of how you got from San Francisco and why Denver, most importantly. And the second part of the story, which I would love for you to touch on, is that I knew that you had a job, and Niji had a job, and Agent Sync was this thing that happened somewhere on the edges of life, and you were deploying product, you were charging clients, but you had day jobs during the day to figure this thing out. Like how did you put all these pieces together, and how did you end up in Denver?
Ooh, let me remember the time before COVID, although only moments before COVID. So Niji was at Zenefits from 2014 to, I guess, 2018. And that was where he saw the problem that Agent Sync solves. So in the regulatory space for insurance, you have to be licensed to be an agent to sell insurance and have conversations about insurance. Some of you may have watched the meteoric rise and then some of the fall of Zenefits when they hit some regulatory issues. Niji became the director of licensing compliance while he was there, and then was asked after they did all the remediation to figure out how to not get in that state again, and he realized there was a gap in technology. So we've been talking about it over the dinner table. I was at Stripe at the time, and we'd always, coming out of LinkedIn where we worked together, thought, let's build something, but we never came up with an idea that felt good. We decided to start kicking the tires on it, and then he left Zenefits in 2018. I kept my job so that we didn't have to move in with our parents, and I worked nights and weekends, and he hustled on it during the day. And so that was how the pieces started coming together. In December of 2019, we realized that we had bigger product market fit than we thought, and that was really exciting. So one thing that we think a lot about is just like the Agent Sync that we saw at our kitchen table in 2018 and the Agent Sync that are today are not the same. Our understanding of who we could sell to, why they were buying has evolved over time, and we saw that opportunity towards the end of 2019. We expanded into the carrier space and a thing called an MGA, which is specific to the insurance industry, and we started to get really good fit there. And once we did that, we're like, okay, we want to grow the company. Born and raised Californian, born and raised Northern California, love San Francisco. Not a great place to start a tech company that is insurance regulatory compliance software built on the Salesforce platform. And also we were ready for a change in our life. So we looked around and started talking to people about different places, and Denver got on our radar. And after a bit of research, we got really, really excited about coming out here. For us, it was really important. So Niji does the go-to-market and business side of the house, and I do product and engineering. And we really didn't want to be in a situation where we had HQ be product and engineering in the Bay Area and other people, other places. We wanted a team together. We wanted really strong talent from both sides, and the Denver area has that, and it was exciting for us to be able to come to a place with that. So we made the decision in principle in December of 2019. We closed on our house the first week of March, and we were in a minivan with 2 cats on April 14th of 2020, driving through what felt like the apocalypse to our house in Curtis Park here in Denver.
Well, we're so excited to have you, and it's been a gift over the course of the last couple of years. If you followed Agent Sync, their financing and their growth has been meteoric. When the small team, Jen and Niji and a couple of, I think, fellow employees landed here in Denver, they were 4. How many employees do you have today?
We have 220 something plus. It's moving all the time, but we're kind of marching towards about 250 by the end of the year.
So when you think about it in 24 months, not only has the company grown from that early stage seed investment to over $1.2 billion in their valuation, they've added 220 additional teammates to the team in that same period of time in their office here in Denver. And so it's been an incredible story and an incredible journey. Give us a real, in layman's terms, you're giving, what does Agent Sync do? In really ordinary terms, the scale. You mentioned the product market that was really big. Yeah. What's the scale of the problem you're solving?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So, and I say that as someone who knew nothing about insurance when I started working on this problem statement. So I just took it from a pure engineering perspective. But things I find kind of fascinating. We all have insurance. It's part of our day. Either it's coming through our company, paid for health, or we've acquired it individually for your home, your apartment, your car, whatever it is, and then there's many forms of insurance. Every single transaction in the insurance space, the individual who's doing that transaction must be licensed. There are regulatory requirements, and because we are a complex country, they vary by state. And there is a relationship. There's actually a 5-point relationship in any transaction for insurance. There's you as a consumer. There's the agent you're working with. Even if you don't think you're working with an agent, there is a licensed entity behind that. So even in the insurtechs that put forward more of a bot or something like that, the regulators require there to be a licensed individual behind that. Oop, this guy's going to chase me around. There's a licensed individual. There is the entity that they work for. So an agency. You might think about your State Farm agent. They work for State Farm as the larger carrier, but they have an office, or maybe an independent agent has an office that they're working for. Then there is the carrier who's doing the underwriting and is actually going to put the money forward if you go forward on your policy. And there's the state. And the state regulator is making sure that individuals who are selling policies have done the right training and are set up in the right way to have the conversation with you and be a trusted entity. The way that they know that is there is a bunch of training. There's also licensure. So you have to be licensed in a resident state, and then in any state you want to sell in. You must be licensed for the type of insurance you're selling before you have your first conversation. So when someone picks up the phone and talks to you about your health plan, they have to be licensed before that call, or their agency can be fined. And so there's a huge complex network of relationships around that. That's what we tackle. In the naivete of not knowing anything about insurance, we were like, let's just tackle it all. Let's just do this for agencies and carriers and MGs and agents and everybody and people. I've learned subsequently, and we do it for life, health, property, casualty, everybody. Subsequently, I've learned that that is considered slightly insane in the insurance space. Most products are maybe carrier-specific in life and health, or agency-specific in property and casualty, because there's massive nuance. It's a super, super complex ecosystem. We think about onboarding and compliance and the data around that. That was not that short, but that was what we do.
So we talked about where the company's traveled over the last couple of years. Tell us what's going on today. What are you most excited about? What's happening in the company right now? And what are you most looking forward to as you guys continue to grow Timber?
Yeah, it's a great question. So as you have heard from my background, I had never been in our company's size before we founded our company. And so I think a lot about where we are in terms of our growth. It is the amount of individuals we've welcomed to Agent Sync in the last 2 years has been a lot. We are still operating, I think, more like a 50 to 75 person company in terms of some of our internal operations because we grew so quickly, maybe even a little younger than that. And so things that I'm excited about outside of product are just learning how to grow up as an organization. There are a lot of things we did early on. We were talking about this earlier in terms of financial modeling and other things that are very mature for our stage. But there are other things that are just like, how do you grow a team? How do you make a team successful at 250 people, at 300 people, and beyond? And it's a different muscle than the muscle we had to build in those early days. So I'm really excited about some of the folks we've welcomed into the team who are helping us grow up. Frankly, and fill in the gaps of I didn't have a product background. You do not want me to be your product manager. I can scrappily get it off the ground. Now we need that professional motion, and I'm really excited for that for us as we grow. From a product perspective, as I mentioned earlier, we have been learning about the industry as we go, and the Agent Sync of 2018 and the Agent Sync of today are pretty different, and so we're seeing a lot about what it means to be a company that has an opportunity to influence network effects in the insurance space, and very, very excited from a product and engineering front to start leaning into that more in our product expression and evolve past just product plays and into more of a platform. So that's a lot of what we're working on the product side.
I think for the audience, it'd be helpful. You touched on it, that some of your financial planning and diligence early on in the business. One of the most incredible things I'd learned about the story of Agent Sync is that Jen and Niji had crafted a very specific week-to-week financial model that allowed them to make on-the-fly decisions as they were starting their business. And so as entrepreneurs, sometimes we overlook that level of detail and that level of rigor as it relates to building our businesses. I would love for you to touch on that for a second, because I left that discussion walking away being like, wow, why haven't I ever managed this thing week to week to week when there's 3 of us? Because it's the entrepreneurial tendency to go do things and create value and take meetings and calls, but I would love to hear about that.
Yeah, so some of that came from the fact that we bootstrapped the company. So when you're paying people out of your bank account, you really want to make sure you can pay them. It's also, I would say, we all have our strengths. Niji's background is in operations, and I'd say Excel models might be one of the things he loves most in the world. And something that I've actually really appreciated about that, especially early days when you're having to do so many things, is I feel so lucky to have had someone as my partner in this that brought him joy. And Brandon, our COO, that's his thing too, and that's what they love doing. And so it wasn't a painful thing. It was a, like, this is exciting. We're building a business. We're building a product, but we're building a business. I know many people who found with other technical founders, which is great because you have that person who can get really excited with you about the product or the engineering thing, but finding someone who can get really excited about building the business and it's not an afterthought or a pain point, it's just their passion, is awesome. I know it's hard. It's easier said than done. I kind of fell into it. I feel lucky. But that was where that came from, and it served us super, super well as we were scaling up, as we were fundraising, as we were making those decisions. But I don't think it's something you can do unless you have someone on the team who really loves it, because I don't want to do that every week. I'm happy to review it. I'm happy to talk about it. I'm happy to brainstorm about it. I don't want to build it.
So the office that you have, I think you're in Rhino.
Yep.
And I've heard, I haven't had a chance to visit yet, but I've heard that culture and the environment you've created for your team is like at the top of you and Niji's mind every day. Tell us about that culture and how it powers what you've been able to build, especially not only scale to 200 plus associates and teammates in that short period of time, but how does it, as you build your company, allow you to really tackle these things at scale?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So I'd say we've learned a lot about that and are evolving through it. We don't have it, it's never a perfect thing, culture, right? And it's evolving over time. One thing that was important to us was actually to start to put language around it. And Lizzie, who's over here, who's our head of people, has helped us a lot in helping form and grow the team around this and get better about it. We started earlier, our COO, Brandon, kind of took a stab at saying, like, here's what I think our cultural values are. And they were really just like, how do Niji, Jen, and I work? What's important to us? What are things we valued from prior companies? Started to put language on it. We had way too many to start. We had like 9 culture and values. It was crazy. We refined them recently. Niji and I sat down and had a really long conversation about making sure we were removing ambiguity from things that we felt were too ambiguous and being really precise. So we have 4 now. They're kind of how we work together, how we work for our customers, and what we value from each other as partners. How we express that has to change as we grow. How we think about that has changed as we grow. But it's something that we incorporated into performance reviews, we incorporated into day in life conversations. We revisit it a lot as a team to help people kind of get in touch with those values. But they really came down to what were the things that created an environment that, frankly, Niji and I loved being in. Did that resonate with the team? Because they have to be authentic. They can't be things that we invent. Like, they're how we work. If they're an expression of how we work, the team is going to feel it. We can live by them. Everyone's going to have a different expression of it. So that would be my only thought on that, is that culture is a really hard thing. It's a really hard thing over time. So it was helpful for us to have someone independently put some words to it, and then we're like, oh, those are almost right. Like, we'll kind of like tweak them and refine them, and then just be really rigorous over time as you think about trying to communicate those messages to larger groups. Everyone's going to interpret things a little bit differently, and sometimes that's good in some cases, and sometimes that doesn't help your mission around culture in some ways. So it's a kind of constant journey.
Well, that's awesome. I can't wait to come visit it and then really understand not only the physical space and the environment you built, but also the great team you built there as well. As we're leaning towards the end of our first Fireside, Denver Startup Week is all about community. For the community, by the community, for the future of the community. When you think about how the community can help you and AgentsYnc get to the next level, what are you most interested in supporting in our Denver Startup community? And what are those things that are passion points for you personally that you really think you could have an overweighted like strength in helping develop here in our community?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm actually just really, frankly, excited to start to meet the community. As someone who moved here in the height of COVID and also had a child at the end of that year, Niji and I have kind of just been heads down in survival mode. So to your point, what you said earlier, just getting people together and starting to meet the larger community and understand what startups in Denver look like more holistically. I'll be the first to admit that that's a newer thing for us, right? We've been here for 2 years, we've been growing the company, but starting to, and we've been here before, but starting to really participate is exciting to us. I think overall, and you mentioned this, something that and I'll give Niji credit where credit is due, something that he navigated exceptionally well, I watched and participated in and understand how hard it is, was around VC funding and raising. And right now the environment's pretty tough. There's a lot of strategies that people are putting in place. And so I think one thing that I'm excited for this community and us being part of it is actually being able to share some of that knowledge and process with people who are interested in it. We're both pretty passionate about it, some of the like good, bad, ugly on it. And I think there's not as much education, I don't think. There isn't as much education out there that I think would be helpful to people who are trying to raise. So that's something, I mean, we're always down to share stories about whatever, but that's an interesting one that I've been thinking a lot about for communities of entrepreneurs, of how do people navigate that, and then think about kind of going into that next level of scale. But hopefully that answers your question.
And how can we help you?
That is a great question. I think they're really just for us right now. It's like kind of getting to know folks and getting a little bit more plugged in with the community, which is more just the connections, and kind of learning a little bit more about what makes Denver tick in the startup scene is always interesting to us. You are also in the insurance space. One thing that we love is also kind of like figuring out where we can work with other folks to solve problems. So that's been an interest to us of partnering. We don't believe we're going to do it all ourselves. And so if anything I said sparked a like, hey, that touches an edge of what I'm touching, or that's kind of an interesting edge to me, we'd love to hear from you and talk about it, because the insurance space in particular is a big, nasty one to try to untangle and help solve, and we're definitely not going to be doing it alone.
Well, we're really excited to continue to watch AgentSync grow here in our community. We're incredibly grateful and happy that you and Niji and the entire world of teammates that are in the world of AgentSync are here, and we're excited to watch you grow. And this coming Tuesday, tomorrow, we actually have a future of FinTech and a state of FinTech panel on this stage talking about the exciting elements happening in our FinTech economy. And AgentSync sits in the middle of that discussion in InsurTech and FinTech, and are really starting to define us as an InsurTech hub here in Denver, Colorado. And so we thank you. Last question is our principal point. If we should remember one thing about AgentSync today and what's next, what is it?
I will say about AgentSync, I'd say maybe less about AgentSync, but never underestimate the complexity of insurance and the fun of solving insurance problems.
Amen. Thank you, Jennifer. Yeah. Wonderful to have you here today. They're going to announce you. I think she's doing it right now.
Thank you, Jen and Eric. Great chat, sharing great information. Now let's welcome our next Fireside Chat with Tammy Dorr, CEO of Q Factor as moderator, and Kevin Riddleberger with Dispatch Health. Welcome, Tammy and Kevin.
Okay, so you guys all have to connect at some point. So Jen and her husband, Niji, run AgentSync, which is a really fast-growing fintech company. If you've ever seen a white box truck that says Fluid on it, running around your neighborhood like an Amazon truck,
to do, because we have the opportunity to both hear about companies, hear about how they grew, but also really get a more personal perspective on what it's like to really be in on the game. So I'm really excited today to have the opportunity to sit down with Kevin Riddleberger, who is the Chief Strategy Officer for Dispatch Health and co-founder, and they have been on a crazy ride. You'll get to hear about that more in a moment, but Kevin's been around for 20 plus years, a clinician by training, and he's given a lot back to companies in terms of serving as an advisor with companies as they continue to grow throughout the city, which is truly the ethos of Denver Startup Week. So I'm excited to welcome you. I think the first thing, if we could just start out by having you give a little bit of background about Dispatch Health, and then in conjunction with that, talk a little bit about your background, and then we'll dive in further.
Yeah, that's
Welcome.
great. Thank you, Tammy. It's great being here. Great being back in person after this hiatus over the last couple years. I don't know what happened, but we're here, which is most important. So Dispatch Health is a Denver-based organization, started back in 2013, really on the premise of improving on the way that patients were accessing care, the way that we were delivering care to patients, inside of their home, the ability to be able to improve clinical outcomes and reduce costs. So if anyone is in the healthcare industry, everyone knows that this is a $4 trillion industry. In the U.S. healthcare system, we are riddled with problems relative to cost of care, relative to clinical outcomes, relative to patient and provider experience. And so that's really our focus and has been our focus from day one. Back in 2013, when we started, and it was really proof of concept of us understanding that patients were having difficulties accessing medical care for their acute medical needs. So think about an individual, 75-year-old individual with shortness of breath. What do I do? Where do I go for that shortness of breath? We started in the EMS system, where 17% of the patients that call 911 really don't need to be transported to the emergency department. When you think about that cost, about $1,000 is devoted towards the ambulance ride. About $2,000 is actually devoted to the ER visit. So what if we were able to meet the patient where they're at and be able to take care of them inside the home, avoid that ambulance trip, avoid the ER visit, and do it 8 to 10 times cheaper? And so that's where we got our start. We expanded in 2015 for patients to be able to access us directly, where we first raised our first round of capital at that point here in Denver, starting with one vehicle, myself and my co-founder answering the phones on the patients, making sure that we were clinically appropriate to send a team out to take care of them. And now we're seeing 1,000 patients a day, operating in 35 states, 50 plus markets. We opened our 50th market last year. We will see in Q4 our 1 millionth patient. We've saved about $800 million in medical cost savings over the years. So having a significant impact on the quadruple aim in healthcare. And over time, we have expanded on those clinical services, not only to address the pre-hospital world, but also identify high-risk patients coming out of the hospital, being able to provide hospital level of care inside the home, SNF level of care in the home, and delivering last-mile services such as portable imaging inside the home. So now we're not just delivering that point solution of ER level of care in the home, but we're now building a platform to be able to deliver safe, effective care inside the home that you ultimately would see in a hospital setting. So it's been a fun ride, as you mentioned. I am a clinician by training, and have seen firsthand the struggles that patients have, the struggles clinicians have, and really how all the industry operates. And so took all those learnings and built Dispatch Health.
It's remarkable to me because I can remember when you all were first starting, to think that you went from one vehicle to being in 35 states, 3,000 employees. I don't know if that's not inspirational. I don't know what it is. You take a big idea and you just work it. And it came from iTriage. What did you learn, do you believe, from that process into Dispatch Health that really helped inform how you would launch and grow?
Yeah, so when I left clinical practice back in 2011 to join iTriage, that was my first job outside of clinical practice. And if you can think about myself and my day-to-day, I was seeing patients in the clinic. I was going to the hospital, rounding on patients in the hospital, spending time in the emergency department, on call and treating patients there, and then going into a startup world where I was interacting with software developers. People were wearing shorts, inside, of the workplace.
And
On
flip-flops.
Fridays they were drinking beer, and I literally was questioning whether I should be reporting this stuff. I had no idea that this was even legal to operate, in this manner. But it was extremely enlightening to be able to bring, all the things that I understood in the way that healthcare was operating to work work shoulder to shoulder with software developers, where they could understand the troubles and actually make quick changes to be able to make impact to the patients and the providers that we were servicing. So, I caught the bug, and I don't think ever be out of the startup world, moving forward. And it was those learnings to be able to pull together industry experts, with software development, with business challenges, and putting all those things together to be able to make an impact, on the industry itself. And when we started Dispatch Health, we took a concept that at iTriage was really consumer-facing mobile app company directing people to the appropriate level of care based on their symptoms. We wanted to up it, further in terms of the complexity of how do we right-size that care for patients' complaints, but then how do we mobilize clinicians safely and meet patients where they're at, inside the home. And so, the challenge was there. It's daunting to be able to really carve a new space. No one was delivering the acuity level that we were delivering inside the home. And so we've carved a niche, now, and now you're seeing a tremendous amount of capital, being deployed inside of care delivery inside the home. And so it's been fun to be on the forefront of this and to be able to push the industry forward on what we're doing.
Well, talk about the early days when you were testing the concept.
Those were the easy days. Yeah, no.
Curious, do
As
you
look back.
Well, do you think it was easier then, or the rapid growth to 3,000 team members? Because they both bring their challenges.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we underestimate the power and the complexity of the growth phase versus the startup phase.
Yeah.
So what was harder for you?
No, when you look back, yes, that, the things that you dealt with were much smaller, but they were extremely daunting, at the time. So
Yeah.
if you can think about, buying equipment, buying our first vehicle. What is our first vehicle going to be, to be able to house our clinicians and carrying them, inside the home? To what is our first space, going to be, and is it going to be able to, grow, with us? To now, having a distributed model that operates in 35, different states. All the regulatory issues that come along with care delivery in the home, and every state is different, is hugely complex. And those are things that we didn't really, think about, early on. But every phase of a startup, has its challenges, and none are greater than others, but you have to roll with the punches on every stage of the startup. So if you had to look back, how do we get off and start seeing, our first set of patients to, all right, how do you expand into another state, and what are the complexities around, seeing patients in another state, to, all right, how do you deliver other services outside of what your core offering, is, to this thing called COVID, and being able to grow, during a pandemic has extreme amount of challenges. I remember back in 2020, all of us in the evening time congregating in a place and making our own gowns. And so we all worked together at making gowns and then sending them out across the country. And that was just another challenge that you had to overcome. But
So you sew?
yes, oh, it was actually kind of plastic gowns that we put together. But it was one of those things where you had to come together, you had to, solve the problems, and you had to move forward. And every day you have those, challenges, but you got to solve them and push the business forward.
During COVID, I would imagine you were a unique solution to prevent people from having to go into a medical environment. How did that impact your growth?
It was definitely a tailwind. And even though it was extremely challenging for all of us, first and foremost, we wanted to make sure that we were keeping our providers safe by delivering care inside the home. And but also being able to provide access to patients. Patients were scared. Mm-hmm. Patients were scared to go into their primary care's office or specialist's office. They were scared to go to the emergency department. And so we rose up to the challenge and met patients where they're at, and that's inside the home. And we're able to provide a lot of operational structure to be able to do that safely and effectively. And we've come out of it in a better place, and we've grown a great deal over the couple years during the COVID pandemic. But there's been a lot of tailwinds coming out of it, and now you're seeing a lot of folks moving into the space, delivering care inside the home, a lot of different tech-enabled services for care delivery in the home, from everything from traditional home health to remote patient monitoring, to telemedicine, to hospital level of care. And when we first started hospital level care, this was in 2019 when we launched it in Denver. This is, for those who are not in the industry, the same clinical conditions that you would ultimately be admitted into the hospital for, we would do the exact same thing inside of the home. And so during the pandemic, with the public health emergency, CMS granted payment model for Medicare beneficiaries for having hospital level care inside the home. And so this was because patients really couldn't be admitted to the hospital because of bed constraints. And we are now supporting health systems to be able to deliver this care inside the home. And it's been a huge win for the industry, a huge win for patients to be able to have this level of care in the comfort of their home.
So you talked about the fact that your workforce is distributed remotely, and that happened pretty rapidly. And now we're in this environment where companies are grappling with remote work. How do you address culture? How do you retain and attract? What are you experiencing, and how would you describe the culture that is helping you all achieve your mission?
Well, I think we're a very mission-oriented company. We are building a system of care inside the home by meeting patients where they're at, and that's inside the home setting. So individuals that are attracted to our business are attracted to the mission that we're on and the vision that we're executing on. And so that's a benefit that we have in the industry that we're actually operating in. But like you said, we did go to a more distributed model during COVID, where we were hiring the best of the best throughout the country. We were primarily, from an exec perspective and corporate leadership, primarily in Denver, prior to COVID, but we decided to expand across the country. And we're still grappling right now. We actually built and launched a beautiful new headquarters right in the middle of COVID. So now we have nearly 20,000 square feet in the Rhino area, where we're now bringing folks in on a monthly basis, quarterly basis across the country to do quarterly planning, monthly planning, from a team perspective. But we're still, figuring it out. We're still, determining How often should you be in the office? And how do you coordinate that with your peers, your colleagues? So you're not just coming to the office to come to the office to check a box, but coming to the office to be able to interact, develop those relationships, be able to, understand, if you're early in your career, how do you spend time with leaders? How do you develop, some of that skill set by being in person? And we don't have it right yet, but we're still figuring it out, and I think it's going to be important for everyone to learn together on what the right balance is moving forward. But we're spending more and more time, in person, and encouraging employees to be able to spend more and more time in person.
Yeah, with the growth and the change in work environment, it's tricky.
Yes.
Right? You made a big change when you went to iTriage. Can you just talk about personal decision making around making those types of shifts and taking a risk? And you committed many years to get where you were at in your previous role, before making the move. How did you come to that decision? And it sounds like you're glad that you did.
Yeah, I mean, my wife and I were both clinicians. We met in school, and she decided to take a more conservative route, but she loves taking care of patients every day, and she's been in clinical practice for 20 years. I was never satisfied, with the way that the industry was operating, the way that patients were accessing care, the way that the tools that were given to me and how I needed to take care of patients. And was always intrigued, and I was always asking why. Why are we doing the things that we're doing? And luckily, I found a great role, at iTriage, where I had a couple mentors in Dr. Pete Hudson and Dr. Wayne Guerra, who started iTriage, to understand how they took, their clinical minds and solved a problem. And so I had a lot of, great mentorship, during the time I had at iTriage. But it took a leap for me to go from clinical practice, treating patients every day and making an impact, to, all right, I'm going to actually make a more macro impact on patients' lives. And it was a little bit different, but I knew I was making an impact on patients because I was directing them to the appropriate level of care based on the software we were developing. And then it was about, all right, how do I make even a bigger impact in knowing that there is problems in our healthcare industry and making that leap. And to be honest with you, if I didn't have the trust and support, from my wife and family, it would have made it much, much harder. But they've been fully behind me, and the crazy ideas that I have. And you have to have that. You have to have a good support network to be able to make these big leaps, in your career, and go all in. And it's some people, it's ingrained in them to be able to do that. Some people, cannot do that. And I think it's kind of within yourself, whether you're able to take on that risk, from a financial standpoint, day to day. This is not a 9 to 5. This is 7 days a week. This is kind of, in my case, my third child, where I'm always thinking about what could we be doing? How do we move the business forward?
Okay, so just to wrap us up, just building on what you've learned in your journey, what bit of advice would you give to our participants in Denver Startup Week this year?
Well, I think it's getting back out there. I think over the last couple of years, I remember, being at meetups, every couple weeks and picking the brains of different people, whether it be in the healthcare industry or other industries, and getting yourself out there, exposing yourself, growing your network, I think is very important. We need to, as a society, get back into that. And sure, you could do that over Zoom or over video, but I encourage all of you to develop those relationships at a more personal level in person. I think that's hugely valuable, for us, as a group. But I think that should be the theme, coming out of Denver Startup was Startup Week is how do we get all together again? And I think you'll see some interesting things come out of that.
Great. Awesome. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for joining us and for
Thank
all,
you.
all the great things you guys are doing in the industry.
Thank you, Kevin and Tammy. Great chat and information. Now let's keep these chats going with Eric Matisik as moderator and Jimmy Eberhard, founder and CEO of Fluid Trucks. Welcome, Eric and Jimmy.
Number 3, here we go. So next up, this is really special for me because next up is one of the longest standing relationships I've had in our ecosystem with a gentleman that has been entrepreneurial in every single thing he has touched over the course of the last 25 years. And when I think about Jimmy, what I'm most excited about is lucky number 13. Fluid Truck is Jimmy's 13th startup, and startup that's now a massive multi-state enterprise. And he's a Colorado native, so born here, lives here, gives back here, thinks about nothing more than making Colorado and our community the epicenter of all things business innovation and the future of the transportation economy. His company has been named one of the top places to work by Denver Post. Recently built in, just named Fluid Truck, one of the top 100 fastest growing companies in the United States. And Colorado Biz recently recognized as James Eberhard as one of the top CEOs in our state. And it's really exciting to be here today because Fluid Truck, I think, is your best idea yet. And I welcome James Eberhard to the stage.
Thanks, great to be here. And it is amazing. Like, we go back, I was trying to hire Eric to come be the CEO of a company back in 2007. And he took a look at the company. He's like, I don't know. You made the right call on that company because the financial crisis was right behind it, and that collapsing that company out. But
you never know. You never know. I mean, I think to touch on that, I mean, when I first talked to you about Fluid Truck, I don't know if truck was part of the story yet. I think you were trying to. It was like the Airbnb for like
stuff.
Yeah, stuff. Garage tools and like if I wanted to borrow a lawnmower or a snowblower in my neighborhood, like I would go to this platform and I'd borrow the snowblower for a couple hours. And then I remember this phone call. It was like, hey, I just bought 10 pickup trucks. I'm putting them all around Denver, Colorado, and they're going like crazy. Like, pick up the story there. And like, tell us about Fluid Truck.
Well, I mean, going back to those early days when you start up anything, sometimes you just don't know what it's going to be until you get it out there. And I remember the very first day, I mean, it was Airbnb for stuff. People could rent things from their neighbors, so like tools, sleeping bags, party equipment, and trucks. And on that first day we were live in the App Store, we had someone come on, we didn't know, rent a truck off the platform. That was the very first transaction. We're like, okay, we got something here. And fast forward here about 3 years, 2.5 years, trucks have become the biggest part of our ecosystem. And it was businesses that were coming on to rent vehicles off of us. And we're like, wow, that's really weird. Why is a business coming on renting a old beat-up pickup truck at the time? And when they could go somewhere else and pay comparable money for a brand new one. And then we realized how big the friction and how hard it is to rent a commercial vehicle as a business. I mean, you're driving down to the store or the depot between the hours of 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. If you've ever experienced a rental process at an airport where you're waiting in line, it's not fun. And if you're a business owner, there's no way you can run your business by doing that. And through our platform, you could do it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and be in that truck in a matter of a couple minutes. And that really gave us the ability to go, wow, this is a big opportunity. We cleaned everything else off the platform, went all trucks, got brand new ones, did deals with the OEMs. And before you know it, 2019 to today, we've gone out to now 300 cities across the US. We've gone from less than 10 people in the organization to we're about 450 here today. And we're out there continuing to transform how trucks are used. So it's been a lot of fun.
That's an awesome story. So when you talk about the Airbnb for stuff, like the snapshot today is 450 employees. You've done some really significant rounds of financing. How many states do you operate in? You said
Well, we're in 333 cities officially, 57 markets, but not all states.
is there any Airbnb for stuff left, or is it 100%?
It's all trucks.
Okay, 100% trucks.
Yeah. I mean, we saw some amazing business models, but nothing like the truck. And it was just a amazing what a pain point that is. And we dug into the TAM nationally. I mean, the industry we're playing in is $30 billion a year in TAM. We're like, wow, it's a huge opportunity controlled by a few players. And we really went deep on it, and we've been able to be pretty revolutionary in what we're doing.
And how many trucks do you have in your fleet today?
Well, we don't openly talk about the number, but in every market we'll have hundreds of trucks.
Okay.
So.
And there's this thing called Christmas that's coming up. How do you guys participate in helping some of the largest delivery and last mile companies scale up
Sure.
for holidays? How does that work? Does that impact you?
I mean, oh yeah. I mean, so we have businesses that are starting up. They'll hop on our app, book one truck, book 50 trucks, and we have people starting up a delivery company on the back of our platform. And so, I mean, we'll also play into like the ecosystems of the Amazons of the world, the FedExes of the world, UPS, but everything from big companies all the way down to small companies that no longer need a fleet of trucks to use, or no longer need to own a fleet of trucks to run their business. And so whether you're starting up a brand new bakery and you need a place to deliver out to the customer, because that's now a big part of our overall ecosystem is getting goods to the consumer. We provide you an on-demand solution to do that.
That's awesome. So 450 employees here in Denver, Colorado, one of our amazing unicorns. When we talk about what's happening next, when you think about fundraising and scaling, like, what do you see what do you see Fluid Truck having the largest impact on our community? You're everywhere. I see it's fun to see your vehicles around because I'm like, it's Jimmy.
Yeah. Well, no, it's fun. Like, you go around, it's like the slug bug game where you used to punch each other.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I mean, it's out there. I mean, we're powering a bunch of startup companies right now.
Okay.
But I mean, just kind of like if you look like AWS back in the day, 20 years ago, you used to buy servers. Today, you go AWS and you start your software company. And you can do that with us right now, is you can hop on our app, download Fluid Truck from the App Store, and go out, book one truck, 10 trucks, whether you just need it for a couple hours, whether you need it for a year. And we have people that are starting up all kinds of new innovations on delivering goods to the home. And so looking at that, like frozen foods, how do we get meals to people? How do we get goods to people? How do we transform services? Because the consumer behavior has been accelerating. It was already going this way, where on your phone or you're at your house, you need some stuff, you drive to the store, and 2-3 hours you're back at your home with the goods you need. Now you hop on your phone and you expect 2-3 hours, and you want that stuff there. And that's the business models that are going to work for the future. And so we're helping enable that across big and small players.
Well, we're really excited to have you in Colorado, and it's fun to be able to see this massive disruption in the transportation economy holding ground right here in our state. So couldn't be more excited for you. Let's talk a little bit about Jimmy and James as an entrepreneur. When we got to know each other, like I said earlier in the introductions, you've always been entrepreneurial. When I first heard about you in the city, this was back when we had flip phones in the early 2000s, pre-BlackBerry, anything. Everything was like, MIDI, any sort of output on your cell phones. Tell us about that first company that we were able to learn about together, and what drives you? I mean, 13 companies. I mean, that's an incredible number of companies. I assume some are successes, like Fluid, and there's probably some others that are buried in the backyard.
I mean,
let's go back to some of those early ones.
So a company called 9 Square I founded in 2019, and so it was back when you had those old Nokia phones where it would just have beep, 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 beep.
2019 or 2000?
Sorry,
1990.
Sorry, 2001.
Yeah, 2001. Okay, yeah.
And so I started that company up, and it was really just like you had this Nokia phone, and you could customize one downloadable spot. And so I said, okay, I'm gonna build this company up. And at the time, my friends were like, oh, come on, really? You're gonna sell ringtones? And then I got the nickname Jimmy Jingles from them, just completely mock me. And I think it goes back to one of those things like, everybody around me is like, that's a terrible idea. That will never work. You're crazy. Like, let's go do a real estate venture deal, or let's go build something else. I'm like, no, I think this has got legs. And I think, it's a testament to like, when you have an idea, you want to go out there and build it, you're going to have a lot of people calling you stupid. It's just natural. There's a lot of naysayers out there, but if you believe in it, you have to invest in it. You have to be resilient. And no matter what anybody calls you, if they call you Jimmy Jingles, you still go after it. And sometimes you're going to fail. Usually you will, just because like there's so many other factors. I mean, in 2007, like Housefront got taken out by the financial crisis. I had a couple other startups going at the same time that all got knocked out by it. And so, I mean, you can't discount timing on any of this, but I mean, you have to be going out there taking multiple swings at the fence all the time. And I don't know, for me, maybe I'm just dumb, but I love building stuff. And that's what I do. And so, you know, I'll be building companies, people, products until the day I die.
Well, you're really good at it, and Fluid Truck is a huge testament to that. Earlier, when we had Agent Sync on stage, you know, Jen had talked about having that moment of reality that they had a massive product market fit. You had that same thing with Fluid Truck when you put trucks on the app, and all of a sudden you just saw trucks flying through the app, and you're like, we don't need to do screwdrivers or tents or sleeping bags anymore. How do you have that discipline to be able to, you mentioned you're going to be building things forever. How do you have that discipline to figure out that signal and noise as an entrepreneur? Because it's so easy to chase shiny objects. Like, how do you find that signal that you're like, that's what we're doing?
I mean, ultimately, I think it's looking at the customer. And it's going back to the customer. You look at what their needs are, look at what the competition's doing, and if you can go out there and save them time, save them money, you know, that's where you see your product market fit. And then you have to look at how big is the market, how big can it really be, and sometimes you're building for something that didn't exist. I mean, when I started the ringtone company, I mean, at that time, only Nokia phones in the US could take them. And then, you know, there's a whole universe that transpired where you went to, you know, MIDI ringtones where you had, you know, different types of sounds that you could be hearing, and then you went to audio real tracks, which was a snippet of the actual song. But at that time, there was just a small market with one slot and a handful of phones in the US. And I think, you know, ultimately you go back to the customer, and sometimes you're building it for what you think is going to come. And you know, ultimately you've got to have that product market fit where it's going to help people in some type of way that doesn't exist today.
When you think about Fluid, I mean, I've had a chance to meet some of your teammates, and they're always so excited to tell me about you and the vision and the energy you drive the company. What's that one accomplishment or a couple accomplishments inside of Fluid in the last few years that you're most excited about? Like, what are the big accomplishments that stand out as you've grown that company?
I mean, there's a couple. I mean, one that's super meaningful to me is, I mean, I kind of look around the room where I have people in the organization that, you know, early on in their career or just jumping into the technology side, that have gone out there and just been badasses. And it's kind of like part of what I look at is like building people as a part of what we do. And my ultimate goal is I want to see successful leaders come through our organization, learn from me, the team, learn from the just throwing them into the deep end, saying, hey, figure this out. And watching them grow. And we've built some people that I know are going to build bigger businesses than what we built at Fluid. You know, looking at over the last 3 years, we've built a national footprint. You know, operating just here in Denver to servicing tens of thousands of businesses across over 300 cities. I mean, that's a pretty big testament. It's tough to do, especially with physical assets, which is like, this is my first play. Everything else has been software driven. This is the first time, we built something that's, you have to have physical assets, which means you must plan a lot deeper in, and just kind of watching the team be resilient and building out a national footprint in the mix of COVID where, meeting people over Zoom and trying to assess, like, are they going to be a good cultural fit? Are they going to be entrepreneurs that go out there and build, that can create, and will grow to the next levels and grow the next levels inside the organization? And those are probably the two things I look at as like, okay, we've done really well. We can always do better, but those two things we've done pretty successfully.
You talked about this being one of the first physical products that you built, and when I think about Fluid Truck, you're right. The complexity versus software is incredible. You have physical trucks, so I have vehicles. I have drivers that are completely unpredictable that drive those trucks. I have other drivers in the road. I have cargo and packages and assets that my customers own, and I have to get them from point A to point B inside of a truck with a driver and an asset that I have to manage. Like that's a gnarly new world.
Oh, what's within supply chain? I mean, it's
a gnarly new world.
Then you have like, okay, this mirror's not getting manufactured anymore, and I'm not going to see these vehicles. I mean, ordering thousands, tens of thousands of vehicles from the OEMs, and not sure who's going to deliver, when they're going to deliver. Sometimes they'll say, hey, it's going to be here in about 5 months, and it shows up in 2 weeks. And being able to adapt to all that is
a lot.
It's a lot. And I mean, just having the software and trying to predict all the things that needs to happen and how do you protect it, make it safe, how do you insure it, that's a lot easier to do than just trying to manage through the supply chain and the physical assets, because it is a big challenge. When it's there on the ground, you have to have someone there that's going to deal with it.
Well, you mentioned earlier the incredible gratitude you have for your people and your team members and your staff at Fluid Truck to be able to one, adapt in this crazy environment, but two, it sounds like there's a bunch of them that have incredible skills that are way smarter than you in all their areas that are awesome. How do you build that culture? Like what gets people attracted to joining you in the vision of Fluid Truck?
I mean, I think one of it just, we look for people that have drive and that they want to go out there and build. They want to take ownership of what's going on out there. You know, the word of "it's not my job" doesn't exist inside our company. Like if I hear that like in an interview anywhere else, like see ya, like that doesn't work here. But it really is trying to hire and bring that ecosystem of people and keep it flourishing. And it's tough sometimes because it's never, you know, with any startup, I mean, there's a lot to manage, there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of risk. And every step of the way you try to reduce that risk, reduce or improve predictability, and you need people that are going to be resilient across the way. And so like trying to, you know, look for that in the first interviews, and like I've set questions, I try to ask people to tease it out of them, but really trying to care that. And when you get someone that's not in that mindset or is that detractor in the organization, you gotta get that person out as quick as possible. I mean, that's what destroys companies, and it's a tough thing to recover from.
So it sounds like, you know, A players attract A players, so you want to keep those deeply involved in the organization. You talked about the selection around the culture. Like you mentioned earlier that you love building. You love building people. You love developing people. Like, what are some of the things that you focus on with you and your leadership team to like allow those entrepreneurs? I think we said it's not my job, doesn't live here. Yeah. Like, how do you instill that in the culture, and how do you develop leaders to be like you, to just go run through walls and solve things as an entrepreneur? Like, how do you convey that?
I mean, I think that the way to look at it is, you know, whenever I'm setting up goals for teammates, or like, you know, sometimes I'll be setting goals up for them to fail. And I know it sounds bad, but like, I mean, literally, like, you want people to grow. So sometimes it means like, you need to fail, you need to fuck up. You know, setting goals that are sometimes ambitious, sometimes you're setting goals that are gonna help them along their way, but it's putting those challenges out there, and then you look back at like, what are they really talented in doing? What do they love to do? And I always believe that it's not what you've done your career, what you've gone to school, it's what you love to do. Is if you can match a person up with what they love to do and what they're doing, they're gonna be more successful than someone that's spent 20 years in the industry doing just that, and trying to identify that, which is difficult to do, but there's certain ways you can start assessing it and, you know, letting them fail on a thing, and when they mess up on it or they exceed through it, you know, it's pretty cool to see, but it's building those from those spots of letting people know that it's okay to take risks. Letting people know it's okay to make mistakes, and off that, you start seeing people really take the formation of how do I actually do this.
Notice that specifically with the fact that you have trucks all over the city, and you've had some great awards that the company's been awarded over the course of the last few years. When you think about the responsibility, especially now as being one of the largest, you know, software transportation businesses, physical asset, you know, with trucks as a business, if I said that right. When you think about that in Denver, what's a responsibility you think about as it relates to the startup community and Denver itself? Being a native, I know you care about this place a lot. Like, how are you thinking about as Fluid grows? Like, what's the impact of Fluid on the city? And how are you thinking about as the CEO of like, the responsibility of things you can do to not only make your company but the community great?
Well, I think it's, I mean, if you look at the foundation, I mean, you need talent.
Yep.
You need an idea, and you need capital. I mean, those are the three kind of fundamentals. You know, you can do it with two of the three sometimes, but I mean, you have to have the people, and you have to have the idea that's going to grab product market fit. And I think ultimately, the more we can help attract talent to come out here, the more this idea of like, hey, you can build billion-dollar companies in Denver, Colorado. I mean, I don't know how many times I've had, you know, Silicon Valley-based investors saying, okay, when are you going to move out here? And I'm like, we're not going to. Like, well, you can't build a billion-dollar company outside the coast. It just doesn't happen. And like, you know, hearing that, you know, as an entrepreneur, it kind of makes you think like, wow, shit, maybe they're right. There's a lot of data out there off of it, but the simple thing is it can be done. And through COVID, I mean, investors have gotten a lot easier about where they're putting money to work, and it doesn't have to be inside the belly of the valley to get capital and do big rounds. And so, like, having that, yeah, it can be done, but more importantly, like, you know, trying to grow people, trying to grow other founders out of our organization, so they are going to go out. And I kind of look at like as my goal sets are, I've got a couple that around Fluid, but I have others that are other people that come through our organization and build billion-dollar businesses, and that's what I want to see happen.
I love that mindset. I also love the fact that Two of our founder firesides today are companies that move from San Francisco to build their unicorn in Denver, which is even more of a confidence as it relates to their ability to do that here. So Jimmy, as we wrap up, first and foremost, thank you for all you do for Denver and Colorado and all the employees and also partners of Fluid Truck. Like, it's awesome to have you here, and it's awesome to see you succeed with lucky number 13 at this scale, especially knowing you for the last 2.5 decades. Like, this is real, it's awesome, and congratulations.
No, thank you. And I mean, I look at it as like, thank you to Denver. I mean, because honestly, I moved back from DC to Denver to start Fluid. And I look at the ecosystem here. I mean, it's a lot different than back in 2000 when I was starting up, my first companies. And it was like, back then trying to get engineering talent, venture, forget about it. But it's changed a lot here, and it's just awesome, man, because it takes an ecosystem, it takes a lot of people out there, supporting each other, giving each other feedback, and sometimes not positive feedback, saying like, hey, that's a terrible idea. That either drives you and focuses you in and makes you better, but this ecosystem that we have here is pretty special. I don't think I do enough to support it, but I'm always aspiring to do more.
Awesome. Well, last question is our principal point. What's the one thing you want us to remember about Fluid and what's next for the company and our community, and any departing thoughts on how we can all help?
On that, if you ever need trucks to start your business, don't worry about going out and buying them. Download Fluid Truck, the app, and away you go. Whether that you move stuff, you're throwing a party, or you're building a delivery company, come with us. Also, as we kind of look at like Denver, entrepreneurs out there, we're always supportive. We always want to be working. You got ideas, hit us up.
Awesome. Well, thank you, James Eberhard and Fluid Truck, for our founder Fireside. And how awesome is this? Three unicorns down, 2 left, and 5 years ago we had 5 total. It's amazing. That's amazing.
Thank you, Jimmy and Eric. Wonderful chat and information. Now let's welcome our next fireside chat with Tammy Dorr, CEO of Q Factor as moderator, and Bijal Shah with Guild Education. Welcome, Tammy and Bijal.
I like to sleep. What's up, baby? God, you look good. You guys know each other? So you guys are going to both be at dinner tonight? Yeah. Jimmy? Yeah, so Fluid.
How many of you know this incredible story of its growth? And is this mic on? Is it working? Yeah. Oh, yeah. We switched it off.
There you go.
Got it. All right. How many of you know the story about the incredible growth of Guild in our community? It's actually really remarkable that this idea would come forth, but also this incredible team gets built, and that's why having Bijal here to talk about her role there, her journey from working with various startups, and then also talking a lot about the culture and the experience that they have had as this company has grown over time. So I think to start off, we'll welcome, and maybe if you could just start off by giving your background, your journey, and your experience in startups.
Yeah, happy to. So I have a background in data, specifically operational research, which now gets classified as data science. So a way sexier name today than 20 years ago on what I was doing. But I started off my career doing management consulting with a focus on working with Fortune 500 CEOs, CMOs, and CSOs, and helping to drive growth in those businesses. I have a pretty robust background in data and analytics, and use that to then fuel myself into working on a corporate strategy team at Visa. I spent quite a few years there, and then transitioned into my first startup, which was my own startup actually, in the fashion space. Realized I wasn't really into fashion, you can probably tell from what I'm wearing, and then eventually transitioned to Ibotta, where I helped actually build out their data and analytics portion of their business, as well as the data product side of their business, before moving on to Guild.
Yeah, I'm just curious, share a little bit about that initial step into the fashion space.
Yeah,
that was your first kind of big shift into that world.
It was a big shift. I had actually, I took my career, everyone, people say like your career goes like this. I think my career went like this is probably the best way to describe it. I actually left Visa and took a sabbatical from there actually and moved to India for a year to do slum development work. And while I was working in India, I realized that a sari, which is 5 yards of unstitched fabric that Indian women wrap around their body and wear, a lot of that was getting thrown in landfills and actually just polluting rivers and waterways inside of India. And I was like, man, like these fabrics get worn once, twice, 3 times, and then people are discarding them, and they're beautiful fabrics. And so it was like, there's something we can do here to like save this fabric, both from a cultural and heritage perspective, but then also from an environmental perspective. And so went down this path of starting this company that basically took the fabric, laid it out like you would, jean fabric, and then started mass producing clothing that was made out of these recycled fabrics. It was really cool. The company is really cool. I just wasn't I really love data, and I didn't need a lot of data to make that work. In retrospect, I could have, but at the time, didn't really require
That wasn't calling. Well, all right, so then fast forward a bit. You were with Ibotta, and then you made this shift to Guild.
Yeah.
And maybe talk a little bit more about Guild and its growth and what all you do.
Yeah, I would love to. So I started at Guild when there were 70 employees, which was in 2018. We now have 1,400 employees. And so rapid growth in a very short amount of time by all kinds of business metrics or people metrics like I just shared. I currently lead quite a few parts of Guild, so everything from product and technology to the operations, analytics, and insights teams, as well as our marketplace operations team. So a pretty wide swath of teams across the organization. And then our coaching organization, which is the set of members at Guild who interact with frontline workers that we support who are trying to go back to school and find career opportunities.
And if you look at the growth, do you believe that the way that Guild started and where Guild is today, has that vision held true from the beginning, or how much has that shifted over the course?
I think the vision of what Guild wants to do has always held true, which is create opportunity for the 88 million frontline workers in the United States who are looking for a better path. And I don't think that that has changed. What I think has changed is the how we get there, how we drive that kind of impact, and how we go about continuing to scale. But the vision of where we're headed and what type of impact we are trying to drive in the world hasn't changed.
Yeah. And then throughout this transition, we've had a lot of conversation about culture. You've heard it on this stage already today. Rapid growth, innovative new business model. How has the culture shifted, intentionally or unintentionally, from the earlier stages of the company to where you are today, and also where you see it going?
Yeah, I think it's really hard to not have the culture evolve. When you are 70 people in a room and you can do a daily stand-up, even 70 is a little large, but imagine you could do a daily stand-up with 70 people or at least a weekly meeting. It's a lot easier to continue to repeat the values, show the values, and help drive what the culture you want to see. I think as the organization gets larger, it's a lot harder, and I do think the culture has to evolve. That doesn't mean you don't retain your core values. Mm-hmm. What that means is you have to get way more intentional about showing how those values show up inside the business, making sure you reinforce the ones you care about, making sure you modify and shift the values that no longer serve you. And I think as we continue to evolve as a business, reflecting on what matters most to us as a business, what matters most to us as people. Businesses are run by people, and I think sometimes folks forget that, which is like, I want to make sure that I show up every day and that the values also reflect my values as a human being and an individual and a leader who works at the company. And so I do think it requires intentionality to keep those top of mind and reviewing them to make sure they still apply or that culture is still the culture you want to create inside the business.
And then when you look at growing, how is it going finding talent? We've heard about the war on talent, We are heading into a different market environment, which I believe is going to dramatically shift what that talent pool looks like going forward. But how has that been for you all in terms of growth?
I feel like we're really lucky. We sit at this crazy intersection of, we call it shared success internally, where we both care about driving a sustainable business, but we also care about driving impact. And I think it's quite unique. We are delivering real impact day in and day out. And so the social construct by which we're operating is so strong that I do think we offer a pretty unique value prop to talent in terms of looking for companies that both will deliver social impact while it's also delivering business impact. And so I think we have been quite lucky to date in terms of being able to recruit the best of the best. As the labor market tightens, especially in certain areas, I think we have to continue to be innovative in what we do and the best practices that we follow to make sure we can continue to stay ahead of the curve.
So in that, if you look at your own experience in startups, but also in growth companies, what has been one of your biggest lessons learned? If you could go back and rewind both either how you lead, something you did really well, or something you would change in the way you grew companies, what would it be?
I think my biggest lesson is maybe I don't think it's a lesson because I made a mistake. It's a lesson from kind of pattern matching over time, which is in a high growth business or in a startup that's going from 0 to 1 relatively quickly or 1 to 100 super fast. I think you have to have Gumby-like qualities. For those of you who don't know who Gumby is this fictional character who can stretch in many directions. And I think that's super critical. It doesn't matter whether you're in an individual contributor role or you're in a leader role. I think it's required that you develop Gumby-like qualities so that at times you can operate at a strategic level, and at other times you can dive into the weeds to help solve problems. And I think I describe Guild at being at its awkward teenage years. It's messy, it's super messy, so I won't tell you otherwise. But I think the ability to have those Gumby-like qualities, I think, are pretty critical to being able to keep at pace with the growth of the business for yourself. Because I think those people who continue to grow alongside the business growing are the ones who can continue to be with the company as it changes and morphs into something new and better.
Okay, love the Gumby example. I'm just curious, who doesn't know who Gumby is?
It's okay if you don't.
Thank goodness. We got Gumby, we got that done.
Yeah, cool.
You've been a face in the startup community. You've been really active in Startup Week and in just giving back in the community over time. As we have a lot of participants that are new or returning, what kind of ideas do you have for them as they experience Startup Week this year?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Soak it all in. I remember moving to Denver and not really knowing what Denver Startup Week was. I joined Ibotta at the beginning of September, and I think a week later was Denver Startup Week. And all of these people came through the Ibotta office for, I think, a pub crawl or startup crawl.
Pub crawl, startup crawl.
Something. Anyways, and I was like, what is happening right now? But I made some really good friends in the community, folks I still keep in touch with today who are CEOs or leaders of other businesses in Denver. And I find it to be such a magical experience to get plugged in, to know what's happening, and to build a community outside of your own work in terms of helping to know what's out there and grow and learn. And so I would just encourage you to dive in, meet as many people as you can, introduce yourself, and participate.
Great. Any final comments you want to share?
No, thanks for having me. I love this event. I try to do something every year, so thanks. Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you, Bijal and Tammy, for the inspiration, exciting chats on the main stage. Now, let's welcome our final chat in the series with Eric Matisik as moderator and Brian Egan, co-founder and CEO of Evolve. Welcome, Eric and Brian.
Final stretch.
the last leg. That's how it works.
I would say we save the best for last, but that would be completely shortchanging the other 4 amazing CEO founders of our founder Firesides. And as I said earlier when I left the stage, 5 years ago, I don't know if we had 5 unicorns in the city, and to have 5 of them on stage, to be able to have amazing fireside chats is just incredible.
I'm trying to be respectful of our sponsor over here. It's not actually Evolve, so I just need water. That's all.
Well, right now it's Evolve.
Okay.
Right now it's Evolve. So our last fireside chat is one of my favorites in the context that I've known Brian Egan since he first moved to Denver, Colorado. He was an associate at Gunderson, one of the famed venture capital law firms out in San Francisco. He was recruited to Denver, Colorado to lead an early stage company, one of the first 10 employees at a company called Exclusive Resorts back in the early 2000s. And Brian was part of that business from that point in time all the way up until a little over 350 employees, almost $2 billion in properties, and had left that business to start with one of the other associates from that firm, Evolve Vacation Rental at the time, and as Brian and I were talking before this, at 48 years old, he's proud that he's only had 3 jobs. He's not sure if it's extreme focus or pure luck, but
stubbornness.
Stubbornness. 3 bullet points on your resume, and obviously some incredible ones. Exclusive Resorts is an incredible story if you don't know it. But we're here to talk today, most importantly, about Evolve Vacation Rental. So Brian, let's really tell us about the business. For those who aren't familiar with your company, give us a snapshot of what the company does, who you serve, where it lives, and where you're at right now as a business. Stats and figures.
Got it. Thanks for having me here. Okay, Evolve is a vacation rental management and hospitality platform. So think about us as a partner to vacation property owners. They bring those properties onto our platform on an exclusive basis. As part of that onboarding process, we vet and verify all the details of that home. We shoot all the photography. We have our professional marketers turn it into an incredible listing. And by the way, we now know that it complies with our brand standards, so we can turn around and market it to all the guests and consumers out there who want to book vacation properties. We do that on our own site, evolve.com, as well as by distributing onto all the leading sites in the industry. So think Airbnb, Vrbo, formerly known as VRBO, nice rebrand, and Booking.com, Expedia, etc. We currently have 25,000 properties, give or take, active on the platform. We've booked over $2 billion life to date. We think we're going to book about $1 billion of that, or $1 billion this year. We've been at this a little minute, and we'll talk about that, but the slope of the graph has not been linear. It took us a hot second to figure all that out, but that's where we are today.
That's awesome. Well, it's really exciting to have Evolve as part of our ecosystem, and both from a software perspective, but also from being in the vacation rental and hospitality space. We almost have like this corpus of awesome hospitality companies here, with Vail Resorts always being here for a long time, Alterra being active in the hospitality space, companies like Stonebridge, who own hundreds and hundreds of hotels, and of course companies like Exclusive Resorts, Evolve Vacation Rental, Inspirato. Talk a little bit about why you think that's happening here in Denver, and also like that impetus that really gave you the spirit to step out from Exclusive and start Evolve.
Yeah, so on the first one, I think that there's 2 dimensions of this as I think about why Denver as a hospitality hub. The first is I think it's actually a microcosm of the flywheel that gets built that develops any startup community, and this just happened to be a vertical category where we saw it happening first. And the way I think about that is you really need talent, capital, and outcomes are the 3 big inputs that spin that flywheel around. The more talent you get, the more you're going to draw capital, the more you get to these bigger outcomes, the more that everybody, the talent and the capital, wants to play the game again. And so I think that started earlier in this vertical market of hospitality, call it broadly, than it did in some of the other markets that we're seeing amazing companies explore now. So I think we're maybe we're like a generation out ahead, and hopefully an indication of what's possible as we bring some of these other categories and just the overall ecosystem through. What was the second question?
The impetus.
Oh yeah, why did we start the company?
To be inside this amazingly comfortable company that you'd helped build,
right.
To step out on your own with one of your co-founders and start something in your basement.
Right, so in Adam's basement. By the way, co-founder Adam Sherry, shout out to Adam.
Amazing.
Born in a basement in central Denver. So yeah, I think two things there. One, that was always, that was a burning kind of itch for me. I was definitely somebody who wanted to put that shot on goal, and that was always kind of in my mind as what I wanted to prepare myself for. So whether it was then, whether it was this company or whatever, I think I knew that if I got to, let's just say, my current age and had not put that shot on goal, that I would regret it. Why then and why this model, though? I think really that came from the experience at Exclusive Resorts. If there's a lot of takeaways from that 7.5 years. The number one thing, though, if you distill it all the way down, is that the value people ascribe to staying in a home versus a hotel or resort is absolutely incredible. And it doesn't have to be a $3 million home. It can be a $300,000 home. It can be less than that. It can be for 20 nights. It could be for 2. People love it. It's a great product. And I think what we saw was after operating, and we can talk about that model another day, but after operating at more of a high-end luxury curated experience level, we wanted to go into the vacation rental market more broadly and make a difference and make an impact. And what we saw in that market and our kind of core hypothesis was, one, this is, by the way, I mean, this is like in a basement in 2011, right? One, this is going to be a mainstreaming category over the next 10 years. We're going to increasingly see owners want to rent homes out. We're going to increasingly see consumers want to make the choice to stay in a home versus a hotel or a resort. Two, as that happens, professionalization is going to matter more, not less. We're going to need to meet the mainstream needs of those consumers and those owners as new people enter the market. And three, if those two are true, then building something that's asset light, capital efficient, and can address this professionalization trend from a standpoint of, call it vacation rental management, operate in any market, up and down the price point spectrum, et cetera, that would be a pretty valuable thing to build and a valuable position to occupy in the space. I will tell you, we got a lot of other things wrong, like a lot of other things wrong, but I'm really glad that those 3 kind of core hypothesis points held up over the run so far.
It's so fun to hear your answers because I know Brian as the Exclusive Resorts Brian. I know Brian as the early entrepreneur Brian, and Brian is the CEO of a unicorn here in Denver, Colorado. It's really awesome to see the scope and scale of how you're thinking about the business, and I think as you and I've talked about, especially over the course of the last year, the impact of your team and people. I would love for you to tell us a little bit about that because I think you and I've always shared that it's people build companies, and amazing people build amazing companies. We've often talked about that. Tell us about the world of Evolve, that culture, and how you find those amazing humans to do exactly what you were just talking about.
Yeah. I'm so glad you're asking that question. Our belief is that everything starts with culture, and when we have devised a flywheel diagram of our, like most companies, we have a version of what I think of as an operating framework that we can place in a flywheel. That 12 o'clock position is actually the Evolver experience. And I want to point out that that's not because we're any less customer-centric than any other company. It's actually because we believe that great teams provide, build, create great experiences for customers. There's a lot here. I think I'll do 2 things. One is point out that we started that process on day 1, literally in Adam's basement. We looked like we were out of our mother-loving minds. We were having these like heated debates about how we wanted to architect the culture of this company that existed only on a spreadsheet and a slide deck on 2 laptops. I'm sitting at a folding card table or maybe like a meal tray table in a metal chair, and we're getting into this rigorous debate about what we want this all to look like. And if I could go back in time, I would actually mix shift our energy towards that topic and away from all the other stuff that we were doing. Because ultimately, I think what we now know, and this is only because I have the, I think, really great privilege, honor of having done this for a decade, so I can see the outcome now. What I know is it's the heaviest lever you can pull. It's the thing that will have the greatest determinant effect on the rest of the outcome for the company or the success. And number 2, it's the only one of all those big inputs, it's the only one that's entirely in your control. No one else gets a vote. That's a really, it's a powerful notion. Everybody else gets a vote on how much everything else costs in the business and how the incumbents are going to behave and what the owners and the guests are going to think and all the rest. But when it comes to who we bring on this team, how we operate and how we interact with each other and with our customers and vendors and partners, that's only up to us. So I'll also say, quick plug, you're going to hear more about this tomorrow with David Hall of Revolution. I don't remember where that is, but I'm excited to have a longer conversation about this.
Tomorrow afternoon, David Hall, one of the managing directors of Revolution Riley Rest Seed Fund, spending an entire hour deep diving into the awesomeness of culture and the culture of paradise. I think it's the name of that, so aptly named. Diving deep into the culture of Evolve, and that's going to happen at Industry in Rhino tomorrow afternoon. So look it up. Look it up.
So be there. I'm just kidding. Unless you want to be there, that'd be great. I said two things. The other one I want to point out. Our culture, there's a lot of things there. We'll talk about it tomorrow, but one of the things that I think is really important is building a place where people can be themselves. I know that whole notion of like, bring your whole self to work and be authentic, et cetera, I think it's been repeated to the point maybe of cliche. I'm less on the whole self thing. I think it's perfectly fine to leave some of yourself at the door if you want. I think I'm much more about, I don't want anyone to ever come work at Evolve, be a teammate of mine and ours, and feel like they have to put their energy into acting like us, being like us, assimilating into who we are. I want them to be there for who they are, because that's actually how we learn and grow. That's actually how we stay nimble as a culture. That's actually why I believe that while culture is harder at scale, it does not necessarily have to be worse. And one of the things that makes it a lot better is getting now over 1,000 inputs of these authentic, interesting people with their own lived experiences. I find that really enriching, and I hope our teammates do as well.
So from card table to today, what's the accomplishment or a couple of accomplishments that, when you look back over the last decade plus a couple years, like what are you most proud of in building Evolve?
Yeah, I'd say two things. One, I'm going to touch on what we just said. I think, the culture, but I want to point out too, I don't, for a minute, think that we have it all figured out. We're a work in progress. We're just a bunch of humans that are flawed and doing flawed human things. So part of our process is refinement and as we like to say, COHAD, communicate often honestly and directly. So a lot of that, but I'm really proud that I think there's almost universally on the team, everybody knows, believes, understands that is our priority. Whether we're great at it that day, in that moment, everyone knows that's the priority. So that would be one. The second thing would be that we didn't give up. The early days of this company were really hard. We did not get shot out of a cannon. Nobody backed up the money truck. We I think, had a good idea, but it was really hard to chase down these owners, and each one only had so much value, and I don't know, maybe I was bad at my job telling the story, I'm not sure, but like for some reason, like people didn't get it, and we did a couple things where we chased growth and took on some approaches that ultimately didn't scale, and the unit economics didn't hold up, and we got to a break point in 2014. I'll never forget this board meeting where we said, well, everything we're trying is failing, and we could build a big business, but it's going to suck, and we're ultimately just going to be playing musical chairs, hoping the music doesn't stop before we get out of here. And that's not any way to live. And so we're going to make the decision to build something really good and durable. And if it happens to turn out to be smaller, we'll live with that outcome rather than continuing to try and chase growth and go for something and time and exit and all that BS. And that, of course, turns out to be the moment where everything started to go well and where we figured out what was essential to this business and when we figured out what was the core. And so that's something I'm really proud of, that we made that determination deliberately, intentionally, that we would rather be good than huge, because I've found now in my experience and talking to other companies and so forth, like that's actually what delivers the big outcomes.
In there, you touched on a little bit, but you said in your introduction remarks a little earlier, this hasn't been linear. Take us on that path from 2010 to 22. It sounds like 14 was a pivotal year.
Yeah.
And then in the last few years, it's been really fun to see the company receive a number of awards and top places to work and a new office space downtown. It feels like it's started to mature to a point where maybe it's a little more linear, but walk us through that as an entrepreneur.
I hope not. Don't say that. No, I'm just kidding. So yeah, I'll walk you through. So we quit our jobs in 2010. We launched the company about a year later in 2011. We try to win these owners. That doesn't work. So we go to these property managers. You're all familiar with that idea of a property manager in a market. We say, why don't you come on with your 100 units of inventory? They say yes. We do that for a little while, 2.5 years. We're getting pretty big. We realize, uh-oh, we're not aligned with these folks as partners. They're like playing games. It doesn't work out. We need to compete with them. We're supposed to be the asteroid. They're supposed to be the dinosaur. We're doing it all wrong. The asteroids and the dinosaurs are not supposed to be friends. Like, we got to compete with these folks. We pivot the business in a hard way, super painfully. The rest of the world thought we were dead for 2.5 years because the number of properties, the one thing the rest of the world knows is the number of properties you have on the platform. Yeah. And they can see it on sites like Airbnb and VRBO and whatever. So we had like 2,000 properties, give or take. And we had that for like 2.5 years. So everyone thought, oh my God, these guys seem like they're nice and they know what they're doing, but they have no idea what they're doing and it's failing and it's just a matter of time. What no one realized was that under the hood, we had ripped and replaced 1,950 of those units. And so once we caught up with that motion, we then went up the ramp in 2015 starting. And at first it was just high percentage growth on low numbers, and then eventually we carried that forward. To give you a sense, this year we started with 18,000 properties. We'll end with about 28,000. So we'll add 10,000 properties to what our footprint is. That's the entire size of the company in Q1 of 19. So it's really, that's the kind of, and another stat for you, you asked for stats and figures, but hold on, put a pin in this on KPIs. We have 1,000 teammates, give or take right now. 750 of those teammates have joined our company since March of 2020. So yeah, the last 2 years have been intense and interesting and in many ways fun, but it's also been, I think, the foundation of a lot of years of grinding in relative obscurity that prepared us for how we wanted to handle this moment. And while not perfect, I think we as a team are handling that moment, by and large well. And I think it's because of that preparation over a lot of years.
As an entrepreneur, especially seeing some of the previous companies you're with grow, I mean, now Evolve at 1,000 teammates is well beyond anything you've been part of in your career. When you think about your own leadership, journey in that chapter, as an entrepreneur, you always think about those breakpoints. At 30 employees, you have to hire someone to run HR. That's a really different leader. At 100, now there's lots of departments and infrastructure. That's a really different leader. At 300, you probably have multiple offices in multiple places, different leader. At 1,000, like all of a sudden you're getting to a scale that it's a different leader. Like, what's been your leadership journey from the wee beginnings in Adam's basement to be able to be how have you seen yourself evolve to be the leader you are today?
Oh boy. So first of all, I put a pin in the KPI thing. One thing every time I get on stage, and one of these things I gotta say out loud, the number of people on the team and the number of dollars you've raised are not KPIs. They're not key performance indicators. They're important milestones. They deserve to be stated and celebrated, but they are not the same as the inputs that actually create value in the business. And so I just want to say that because I've found as an entrepreneur that I get those questions all the time, and it seems like everyone's answer is like the more the better on both fronts, and I would argue with that. So anyways, leadership journey. Man, I would say this. It's been a long one. It has also not been linear. And what I got to, you nailed some of the break points. And I now, you see these things in retrospect. But there is definitely a break point around 125 people in my mind, and that's actually some principle somebody here probably knows. There's a name for that. There's some stuff that happens before then, but that's a big one. Whatever you do after that, it has to be different. And there's another one, and I think it may be just the same one, but we were late, which is right around, honestly, right around 250 people, which was where it seemed like we had figured out the business, and suddenly like we could get the right owners and we could book the hell out of their homes and everything was going well, except for every single system and process in the entire company broke all at the same time. Starting with anything having to do with our teammates and everything that we needed around how to structure that organization and how to ultimately answer the question of what gets rewarded, which is what I think is the question that every cultural architecture is designed to answer. So that was a hard moment, and that was really for us in the back half of 2018. And for me, that's when I recognized I was at the end of my own playbook. And that was a really, it was a jarring moment because you said, like, this is bigger now than anything else I've ever been a part of, just an objective fact. I kind of knew how to get to where we were at that moment from the experience that we had shared at Exclusive Resorts, from the companies I had helped to be, an advisor to when I was a lawyer. I kind of had a really firm playbook, and frankly, it took longer than we thought to get there, right? So I kind of forgot that I didn't have the rest of the playbook. I was like, oh, I seem to know what I'm doing. We're going to figure this out. And I got to this moment, and I realized that there was just nothing. I turned the page, and there was nothing else there in the book. And so I did a few things. One was I went and recruited a bunch of people who had been there and done that. One of the people I want to highlight, because we're talking about culture, is Allison Meadows, our Chief People Officer. Some of you know Allison. She's well known in town. That was critical. We had to bring Rob Levy in as a CFO. We had to bring Mike Keenan in as a general counsel. Those are the first three. Those are all jobs I had, by the way. So if we're taking notes, terrible idea. If you're leading a 250-person company and you're like the COO, the CEO, the CFO, the general counsel, and the head of HR, you're not doing it right. Trust me. And so we brought in the right people to go build that. The second thing I did was I started to invest a lot in getting out of my own four walls and learning from other leaders who had been past where I was. So networks like Ben here in town were great. Just a lot of personal effort to lean in to finding the leaders of companies that had been past where we were. And then the last one was investing in leadership coaching and development in a more formalized structure and bringing some of that into Evolve as well. I don't think any of us can be too proud to say that we need coaches and that we need help and advice, and especially when we're now on the part of the journey that we've never seen before. So those were my answers on how to essentially surround myself with the people who knew what those next pages of the playbook were so that I could focus my energy and attention on how that needed to apply to Evolve and our vision and our mission.
Well, the proof is in the pudding. It's awesome to see what you've built. And
so far.
Yeah. It's exciting to watch that journey too from afar, because I've seen every year, every chapter, of course being friends as well, you have kind of inside edge as that's evolved, and it's just been really, really, really awesome to see where you're at, and can't wait to see where you go next. One thing I've noticed about you as a leader too is that you and your teammates are always around town doing awesome stuff, whether it's service projects that are part of your culture, whether it's ways that you sponsor and help out to support things that are of value to you. How's that part of your culture? And as the one who's in charge, when you think about generosity and the value of Denver and the value of our community, how does that play into what your day-to-day ideas as it relates to Evolve?
Yeah, it's a great, earlier I said that culture gets harder at scale. You need to be that much more intentional and deliberate about it. It doesn't happen by osmosis anymore, but it doesn't have to get worse. This would be a great example of where I think it can not only not get worse, it can get dramatically order of magnitude better, because we're now in a position to be structured and thoughtful and intentional about how we impact our community. So what we launched was something called Building Hospitality, which is our commitment to the communities that we operate in, and we take 1% of every booking that's made on evolve.com, and we contribute that into the rehabilitation and rebuilding of the communities that we operate in, starting with Denver, but also extending out to other areas where we have larger property footprints and so forth. And that's been a really, it's been an amazing program. It's been very galvanizing for the team. I think it's super important. And then I think, to your point, lots of little things too. Having teammates that care. Care is one of our core 10 values. It's actually Care Month. We're about to launch into that in October. We do that every year. And so there's lots of ways that, you'll see some teammates sitting in our cafe, packing up, boxes to send to people in need, et cetera. So I think that all really stems from also just a spirit of hospitality. Ultimately, we're a hospitality organization, and we believe, I'm going to paraphrase Danny Meyer, who I think is the guru of hospitality, and he wrote the book Setting the Table, and if you haven't read it, please do. I think that basically his statement is that hospitality is present when you are there with and for people, not to and at them. And we want to be there with and for the communities that we operate in, and starting at home here in Denver, and have our growth be part of what's with and for that community. So that's why I'm here today, and that's why I'll be doing more stuff this week, and why we're putting a lot of energy into hoping to help others who are in need.
turning the tables on that question,
Yeah.
how can the community here in Denver be with and for Evolve?
Well, that's kind of you to ask. I mean, honestly, I think the biggest thing would be if you help us get the word out. Anybody who owns a vacation property and is maybe thinking about getting into the market, folks who are thinking about renting, normally you might pull up that Airbnb app, maybe give us a look first, or look out for our logo on Airbnb or Vrbo. And then the biggest of all would be, honestly, if you have anybody that you know who's looking for the next chapter of their career and is a talented, hardworking, awesome human being, we love bringing them on. So those would be the big things right now. I honestly think it's like helping us to take the thing that we've built and get it out there in the world and engage with more owners, guests, and future evolvers would be really helpful.
And comment on Denver. Denver, when you started, 2011 to Denver 2022, what are the biggest things you've seen evolve? I love using this word, evolve.
Yeah, keep going, man. It's great.
And why do you think, especially as you grow into the future, that this is the best place for you to build your company and be able to continue to attract the talent and the infrastructure to be able to be successful here?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's kind of a foregone conclusion. Like, we are a Denver company, full stop. That was always our determination. And go back to the conversation we had about hospitality companies here and all the rest, plus we just loved it. But I mean, for me, the stark contrast is when I moved here in 2004 and had been operating in this environment for a year prior to that, to today, it is several orders of magnitude of difference in terms of where we are. And what I would say is this Denver Startup Week is a big deal. I think this is an important moment to shine this bright light on the fact that it has never been a better time to start a company in Denver than right now. And I truly believe that. Yeah, right? And I know that sounds like one of those things that should be a plug line that Eric throws me at the end of this. And honestly, let's co-hat, as I just said. I'm going to prove it to you. We have more talent. It's not even close than ever before. And we have the option for remote, which means that we can overcome the gaps that may exist. We have more capital, full stop. There's dedicated seed funds in market led by former entrepreneurs and operators who came from the Denver market. That didn't exist until 5 years ago, right? We have more outcomes. We have more growth stage businesses and companies that have gone public that you can point at and say unequivocally, you can build multi-billion-dollar companies in Denver. It's just not a debatable point anymore. And when we started, it was a massively debatable point. And then the best of all, you get this, not best, sorry, but this economic environment is going to mean that the companies that get started right now, the correlation is there from the past. The companies that get started in these environments are so strong because they have to be. And this economic environment's one where all the capital allocators have suddenly decided that they care more about capital efficiency than high carb revenue, which is playing straight into our hands in Denver because that's always what we've been about because we've never had anyone back up a truck and give us $300 million to put into our well-designed, very beautiful incinerator. That's just never been the model around here. And so I just look at this and I'm like, oh my God, every tailwind, it's a perfect storm. If I wasn't so wildly excited about what we're doing today, I would literally go start a company right now in Denver. That's, I think, the way to do it.
I'm just going to give an amen to that. Amen. So
that's how I feel.
As we wrap up here, I think if you haven't gathered by now, this is one of our awesome, authentic, pragmatic, unicorn CEOs here in our community that is building not only an awesome company, but most importantly, an awesome legion of humans that are revolutionizing the hospitality community. And as we step off the stage today, Brian, I'd love for you to impart your wisdom. What's the one thing we should remember about your company or what's coming up next that you want to communicate to the Denver community? And what's that one thing you want us to walk away knowing?
Okay, cool. I will do that in 1 second. Eric's going to kill me for this, but I just have to say, everyone please understand that this guy here has been doing this and caring and giving to this community relentlessly for the last 25 years. And it's a thankless job, and he's amazing. I see several faces here who know who this is and what he's been doing, and most often, nobody says thanks. In Denver Startup Week, there's some spotlights, but what I want you to know is that Eric builds community every day here, and it means so much to people like me because I swear, After every big milestone that we hit, I'll be driving home and suddenly a call will come through, I'm on with somebody else, I send him to voicemail because I'm not a good human like he is, and then I'll get this 2.5-minute voicemail that I'll save. I wish I could play one for you all right now, just pumping me up. I mean, he's driving around screaming into his phone about how, and just giving me the biggest pump-up speech ever, and no one knows that he does it, and it's amazing, and thank you for all you do for this community. I really appreciate it.
Love, man.
Little round of applause for him. Okay, one thing that I want you to take away. It's where I challenged you earlier. The future's not linear, folks. We are so early in this journey. I mean, we have 25,000 of these homes on our platform. There are at least 2.5 million of them being rented out every day, and that's just in the US. And I think we all know, if you've rented a home in the last 5 years, there's some opportunities to improve that experience, and there's some opportunities to make it easier for owners to access this market. And I find myself in a truly, I am humbled by this, truly, and I am excited by it and motivated by it. I think that we are ultimately in, if I don't know, use a tortured sports analogy, but debate you between the bottom of the second inning and the top of the third. That's where I think the company is right now. And it's possible it's not, it's bigger than that. And truly, I think that the problem space that we're working in is one where ultimately my job's going to be to find the right person to carry the baton, because my career is out of time before we run out of time to do things with the space, with the company, with the platform. So we're on what we consider to be a multi-decade journey. We're super excited about that. We don't know where it all leads, but that's the mentality and what I would leave you with. We're just getting started.
Brian Egan, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Eric and Brian. Our founder Fireside Chat has come to a close. Thank you to all the inspirational founders today. Amazing stories and amazing success. Thank you. Our next session will take place at 1:30.
You guys got to meet.
Named Why Conscious Leadership Wins, a Fireside Chat with Kaylee Klimp.
All things amazing human transformation / finding the linear path in the chaotic mind of entrepreneurship.
Feel the bruising through the skin. He won't go back to being green again. Try to hold on to it, but
as strangers. However close we get sometimes, it's like we never met. But you and I think we can take it. All the good with the bad, make something